Next month, the Republic of Uganda shall make 60 years. But we know that we shall take evaluation and take stock of the economic gains and challenges you have made as a country. Just taking you back into history, we know that the Bataka movement that was led by the likes of Kangabe Musazi, in that clamor for independence, argued that there is need for economic independence of Ugandans. This came at the work of bad laws like the 1938 Trade Ordinance, among other laws that discriminated Africans or Ugandans from participating in the economic activities and the economic dispensation of their own country. This, of course, led to the independence of the country, but we are here to evaluate that 60 years down the road, do we actually have independence in terms of the economy? We know that our debt burden continues to rise. So is independence only in the word? Is it only a symbolic gesture? Or it must indeed be in the practice whereby the people can actually, have 2 meals a day or more. People can afford quality education, quality healthcare, among other forms of economic independence. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Youth Roundtable, and I'm, of course, joined by a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Cream de la cream to discuss this topic with me is, in no particular order, Apio Monica Prudence, the Secretary for Female Affairs of the National Youth Council of Gulu City. Prudence, many thanks for joining us, and also a student of Makerere University. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you and to all the viewers. I'm grateful to be part of this panel. What Kidega didn't mention is also the CEO of Hawa Foundation, an organization in northern Uganda. Thank you.
Wow, Hawa. I like the choice of diction. If you're a religious follower of the Youth Roundtable, then this face is very common to you. Comrade Lawel Muhwezi, a member of the Now Generation Uganda and a law student at Makerere University. Lawel, thanks for sparing the time once again to be on this show.
So it's a pleasure. I am glad to be back. I hope that we shall have a fruitful conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A first time on the Youth Roundtable, Counsel Alexandra Kamatsko. She's a lawyer, but also I know she has interest around fintech. Is that financial technology?
Yeah,
as well as the empowerment of women, gender equality and things like that. Alexa, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Moses. As already mentioned, I'm Alexandra Kamatsko. I'm a lawyer majoring in tech law and legal technologies, and I'm very passionate to women's financial inclusion, and I'd like to impart my view and little knowledge I have for this roundtable. Thank you to our viewers.
How do you feel being on the show?
Oh, it feels interesting. I've shared some perspectives with some people already, and this is a very brilliant panel. It's my absolute pleasure to be here.
Wow, amazing. Finally, an advocate of the High Court, Counsel Terry Kahuma, who will soon be an enrolled member of the bar. Terry is the founder and runs the Simply Legal YouTube channel and is a lawyer. Terry, many thanks for joining us once again. It's the second time being on the show.
Actually, it's the third time.
Third time.
Thank you so much, Moses. Me and Moses go way back. I have met brilliant other panelists here. Lawel, I know you, definitely. And my two comrades here, I think you're distinguished ladies. And I know you're going to add a lot of value to our roundtable. My name is Terry Kahuma. I am the usual host on Simply Legal by Terry Kahuma on YouTube. I am also the founder of a legal app called Fameron, which connects lawyers and people together. Much like Alex, I am very passionate about legal technology and how, as young people, we can be able to penetrate the world with our brilliance and innovation skills. I would like to add, I believe I would like to add a lot of value to this roundtable. And yeah, let's just enjoy the show.
Thank you, thank you. With no particular consideration, let me just begin with you, Comrade Lawel. Lawel, my own perspective, and this I say without fear of doubt, I am very reserved about reading European literature. And this goes as far as reading literature of Africans who have had a fair share of European education. And to this I'm talking about Dambisa Moyo. Dambisa Moyo is a scholar of economics, but she has written so many books. But in one of her very interesting books, which is Dead Age, she asks a question, that what would happen if African states stopped, if the IMF World Bank said that we are no longer going to lend money to African states, where would we be as a continent? But that aside, Uganda's economic journey. I know you're fresh from constitutional law and history, so could you just take us through how do we find ourselves in a place where, we are trying to create economic independence amidst the colonial history? So just that history for the viewers' benefit.
I don't think I am very good with the facts. Maybe I could just give context
Sure,
of the discussion. Is that largely you have a territory which used to have less trade with the outside world. So we largely did normal subsistence, farming, agriculture, for our own consumption and maybe harvests to our leaders, tribal leaders, kingdom kings and queens, until you have these white man. I think the white fathers, the Catholics, and the different people come in to introduce that form of trade. Of course, our economic history is intertwined with the explorers, and then who paved the way for the missionaries, and then the traders, and then also the Indians who came basically in Uganda and East Africa to construct. They are called the Indian coolers, the ones who were constructing the railway.
The coolies.
And so they come in with these other ideas of long distance trade, among others, slave trade. But for me, I think just to take it quick, I want us to start this conversation from the period around from 1894 to 1962, where you had the introduction of the cash crops. You had cotton. There's a debate around cotton. Others say it bore up around 1904. Then others say actually before his coming, where they had cotton from the Catholic priests around 1880s there. However, this was not what in modern day we call fair trade. It was you had a growing of cotton and other cash crops for the interest of the European market, and that whatever progress, any introduction in cotton or even systems of agriculture that were introduced to them were not necessarily for the benefit of the indigenous or the local people within East Africa and Uganda in particular. So we had these cash crops put in place, and most of our people were just involved in producing for the white man and for the European market. So we're as good as raw material producers of European markets, etc. In this discussion, I think this recent week there has been that conversation around what we call, what currently called economic segregation, because then there were particular markets would not access, even crops would not trade in, or even there are even roads we are not supposed to use, which were a monopoly of the Indians and the whites. So that is the context. I perhaps don't have the clear facts of which law particularly introduced what and what were the economic effects at the time, but that is the context. But for me, what I wanted to engage largely today is the issue of the role of the Indians before and post-independence, and what it means for our current economic state. And I think coincidentally, we have this discussion where there is a lot of malnutrition statistics are high. You have a lot of starvation in one of the sub-regions of the country. You still have a lot of dependency on climate and weather conditions. And people, for example, TV all the time, you see, yesterday people in Masaka were complaining they planted, but there's no rain. Then you also have parts which have a lot of rain. And so I think for me, the Indian question has a lot of explanation on how we move from 1894 up to now. But what I also want us to discuss is what has independence been like for us economically? Because the period before independence, we had some semblance of good economic development or growth. Also, then I think around the first 8-9 years of Obote's leadership, until we get Amin coming in, and the economy contracts so bad from around 9 to even at 1978, the economy actually declined by around 16%. Then you also have Obote coming, but is trying to pursue some socialist tendencies as well. But there's a lot of economic instability. You also have Tito Okello, who refuses to abide by IMF recommendations, and then you have Museveni, who was prior a socialist-minded individual, but because of the realities, he decides to pursue liberal policies. People who
just hold it right there on the liberal policies, and I want to bring Alexa on that aspect. And thank you for that very good background. Alexa, we can blame the colonial master for all we want, but I think that in the 1980s, when the structural adjustment programs were introduced, I think that African states, and in this case Uganda, was at liberty to either adopt or reject, because the structural adjustment programs introduced aspects of like privatization, aspects of a free market, aspect of opening up the economy to foreign direct investment, and therefore we cannot continuously say that, because the colonial masters left in 1962. The structural adjustment programs were here almost 20, 30 years later, and African states welcomed them. So do you think that our economic status as a country is entirely hinged on our colonial history, or we have been architects of our own economic situation?
Thank you, Moses. So my perspective in that regard is when you look at the 1980s, this is a time largely 1980s to, and early 1990s. That's a time between which government, the Ugandan government, Museveni's government especially, moved towards privatization, after a lot of the existing organizations or the companies tended to, fall, and our economy was really declining, especially with regard to industrialization. Government made the move towards extending these parastatals and making them more privately owned. We realized that this is a time actually when a lot of embezzlement and corruption was also largely introduced into the system. Because this government are trying to allow to allocate these corporations to, privately owned companies or individuals. And there was even a deliberate slowdown by a lot of the ministers in allocating these. It didn't even happen so fast. It was very slow, and it was riddled with corruption. A lot of these government officials, high-ranking officials, were allocating these bids to people they knew, or coming up with their own companies very fast so they can have control of these. So that is an element that we cannot allocate to the colonial system. Whereas I largely believe that these colonial systems put in place structures like that education systems we have, or structures where our kind of governance was not greatly aligned. Even when you look at systems like the land system, that was not very particular to our local situation. You look at the militaries in various African governments, maybe ours wasn't largely influenced, but they're still influenced by colonial powers that later emerged into neocolonialism. Whereas that can be a portion, it's to a very small extent, because now we see government officials coming into play and, reinforcing systems that do not work for people. And that we can trace that back to a time where Museveni went ahead to bring an iron fist on a lot of high-ranking officials. A time when there were very many officials who were sent to prison, or who are removed from their ranks. We see that there was corruption permitting a lot of these, and that has actually trickled down to date. So that's something we cannot apportion to colonial powers or neo-colonial systems, which may be an enabler, but it's not what we can largely apportion that to. We see that now corruption up to date, we do have contracts and bids awarded to, private individuals or certain the government, on the officials in power are partial to certain companies that people have even never heard of that are just brought up and awarded these bids. That has actually moved on from all the way from, you know, let me say late 1980s to date. That is something we cannot apportion to, you know, colonial systems or the colonialists. We have maybe now when we look at the IMF systems of lending and those structures and the new neo-colonial powers like, you know, like China, which are working differently, this could be the blame maybe we still apportion to our governments, because a lot of public projects, those bids are a lot of the money is collected from these loans that we source from foreign countries. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, because you bring a very important aspect, which is governance. And I think that's where I want to explore Terry's mind. Terry, fast forward to the 1970s. We saw President Idi Amin expelling the Indians. And Professor or Dr. Makanji, who is an Indian scholar, writes a very interesting article. And he argues that Indians, at the time of their expulsion, were seen as part of the oppressors. Yeah. Yes, they were second-class citizens in the country in terms of the economy, but they were seen as part of the white man oppressor rule. And that is why President Idi Amin was so tough and, you know, had to expel them. Was this expulsion premature? Were Ugandan natives ready to take over the economy? Or should that have been a much more guided process that, well, we want economic independence of our people, but let us do this in a systematic manner, but suspending people and bringing in what you'd call economic novices to run the economy? Was that a politically wrong decision?
Okay, thank you for this opportunity, Moses. I've had two very brilliant minds discussing and dissecting this issue. I think I'll first go back to the pre-colonial time, just briefly in a few statements, and bring it to your question, the time of Idi Amin. In the time before, Africans were so largely marginalized, like you've said. We had the white man and we had the Asians, plus Arabs. So Africans were so marginalized and stripped of their confidence that they believed that they were nincompoops or imbeciles, and they could not even run their own affairs or their own country. So the white man thought for us, and the Asians traded for us.
Okay.
So the fact that we were so stripped of our confidence and competence, we did not believe we had what it took to actually go to school and educate ourselves. Even though there were still colonial schools at that time, like King's College, Bodo, SMARC, Rubaga Girls, still we were being trained for a certain system, that the white man is the ruler, the Asian will also come after, and then the African after. So that's why we could not run our economy before then. The time when Idi Amin came after Obote won, Idi Amin was a tyrant. He just said, you know what? Asians have marginalized my people so much, get out of my country. He gave them 90 days, get out. Now, that was a good step for Africans. We said hooray. But later did we know that that was actually a downfall. That was a pitfall for us. Because we were not yet ready. It's like taking a nursery school child or a child in top class who is 5 years to senior 3. They are not ready at all. Even if you take them to P7, they're not ready at all. So our minds were still a bit... Africans are the most intelligent people, to me, in this planet. Because civilization began from Africa. So everything that we owe into this world, ancient technologies, mid-Asian technologies, and current technologies, everything was borrowed from Africa. Everything came from Africa. So I believe it's just the white man that came and said, you know what, you guys are more superior to you. The Asian is more superior in terms of economy. That's why they can trade. That's why even up to Uganda, we still have this whole thing of Asians run the economy. Just that they were more educated faster than we are. But we also have the competence. So in the time of Amin's time, he came up with decrees. He was a dictator. He said, Asians get out. So Africans did not have the competence at that time, but we had the intelligence. But we were not ready. So it was a premature decision to remove the Asians. I think one step that Amin should have done was, you know what? Let me have these Asians teach these Africans how to run shops, how to run a successful retail shop or wholesale shop, or how to run a supermarket, then after I can expel them. He could have waited for a space of 2 to 3 years, then expel them. But to just get into power and expel them without Africans having that they were not intellectually equipped to know how to trade easily or how to deal with money. That's why we have economics, that's why we have all of these other financial classes that we have right now. So the time when Idi Amin was expelled and the Asians came back, that's why we had a lot of scuffle of expropriated properties. We had, the whole country was in a mess. Currently, I would think our economy under President Museveni's government was doing so well. Yes, we do have corruption, we have our pitfalls, but there's no perfect situation in this world. Everything is a give and take. There is sacrifice for something good. Corruption, of course, had to be there. But as Ugandans, we are empowered. Right now, a person in Chikobo can have his own shop without the government having to help him out. And he can make a fortune out of
We
that.
shall explore the taxation being levied on such businesses later. Yes,
but at least if you go back to 1925 or 1973 and 2022, there is a very big difference in the way we run our economies. A person can have his own app and make money through that. A person can have their own retail shop and sell Omo and sell Nomi and sell Geisha, and he's okay. He's going to have bread on his table. But in the earlier years, pre-colonial and post-colonial, in Amin's time, you had to have everything dictated for you. The soldiers would bring you what you would have to take or what you'd have to shower with. So I don't know whether I've over-explained the question.
I think you've done justice, and thank you for that. Let me just move on to Prudence. Prudence, around 1945, Kwame Nkrumah convened African leaders who were clamoring for independence. And he made a very powerful statement. And he said that seek first the political kingdom and anything else shall fall in place. That capture the political space, then the economy shall come in place. The social injustices shall be addressed. And I think many leaders who attended that conference, the likes of Hastings Kamuzu Band of Malawi, the likes of Jomo Kenyatta, later became leaders of their countries. So it means that they took the advice of Kwame Nkrumah very religiously, that let us first seek the political kingdom and anything else shall come in place. Now let us bring it back to Uganda's case. It looks like many of us were scholars of Kwame Nkrumah, because it looks like we spent so much of our post-independence time trying to fight for political space. One group fighting for political space from another. And that is why there's a school of thought that says that Ugandan leaders focused much more on ensuring that they have political power and forgot the economy. So do you think that our too much urge for political power, our too much urge for, because going back to the 1966 Kabaka crisis, I mean, we spent so much time in conflict. So I don't know, do you think the politics played a role in putting the economy where it is today? I mean, you're a politician, you've offered yourself for elective politics, so you must be knowing.
Well, thank you very much. I believe that politics comes with its own advantages, just like Kwame Nkrumah said that when you get a political field, you later gain more. Now, coming to the context of Uganda, today most leaders come in the name of liberating people from economic challenges, what, and the rest. But you find that most times they forget. But in the real sense, as a politician, if you get that opportunity, the policies that come up, it is the politicians who come up with it. Like, can't you make favorable policies for the people of Uganda? Like, favorable policies like the taxations. Currently, the taxes are very high. Can't the politicians do something about it because they own it? And then I can't say that it is solely about politics, but politics has a lot of influence on our economy. If I'm a politician and I come to say that I'm going to liberate you, what, politicians have a lot of words to say. But if we get into the context of maybe like fronting those economists, yeah, like bringing them and to get solutions of how this economy can be stabilized, because apparently Uganda's economy is not balanced, not in all regions, because some regions can be like they can do averagely well, but other regions are not really doing well economically, and that is something we cannot hide about Uganda. And so, as a politician, it is solely our roles to bring in those policies and to maybe tell our people and liberate them on issues of economics.
Okay, fair enough. Just let me explore your mind
Yes.
regarding the empowerment and inclusion of women in the economic space. Do you think that we have made progress as a country in terms of having more women participating in the economy? I know that the government runs a program called UWEP, Uganda Women Entrepreneurship Program, something like that, that has continuously been financed by Parliament. So do you think that there is at least political will to have more women take up economic space in this country?
Sure, I believe there is more will to have more women, because apparently more women, if you're to compare with those days, the pre-colonial times, the women were not so much included as compared to these days. At least these days, we have programs that have been favoring women, and let's say the affirmative actions that have been taking place. Like, for example, we have the UWEP, that money that is specifically for the women, for their empowerment. And also we find that in the parish development model, they've given women 30% of the shares of that money. So I believe women have been given spaces more than, if we are to compare with those days. And currently we also have a lot of women who are flourishing economically. We can that we have a lot of them. So I can't say that they're not there. Yeah,
Okay.
women are coming up, and I believe more will still come up with these empowerment, which is still on the rise.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Am I allowed to interview?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so before we go so far, I'd like to circle back to Terry's point, and then I'd like to also, reinforce Prudence's point. So when Terry talks about, us not flourishing in the government economically, and then we have the NRM government, and you see people having retail shops and, growing, I think it's very erroneous and misleading. Yeah, we did have, of course, the Asian expulsion affecting our economy because, like you said, the people were not ready. But that's not the reason to it, like, just on the face of it. We had these powers that are placed very heavy sanctions on our economy. Yeah, you see that, of course, that affects even like currently that affects inflow of foreign currency, and overall that causes like an impact on the economy and the GDP generally going down. So we cannot just look at the fact that expelled Asians, Ugandans took over, that was it. We have to look at the fact that what would happen if we didn't have these heavy economic sanctions, if actually whether we were ready or not, what would happen if these sanctions were not, placed heavily on Uganda? Because when you look at the period between 1979 to the time period between when Obote tried to revive the economy and when we started getting foreign debt, you can see that still, even when those foreign investors were getting back property, even up to now, like from that period up to now, you see that still we have had spikes like of our GDP dropping, even in areas where actually we Ugandans were, skilled, like in the agrarian sector, we have seen that the agrarian sector continues contributing less to the GDP than actually industrialization. So would we then say that even the areas where we are skilled, we are actually experiencing a drop rather than, a rise? That's something maybe we could reflect about, that the economic sanctions could have impacted greatly on our economic downfall, minus the lack of skills and the kind of education we had as just clerks. Then and that's something I think we should actually bring up for discussion.
So Terry, I don't know. She brings up some concerns.
Like I'm allowed to.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think Alex, you're right. Economic sanctions came about because of the current political situation that was there at the time. I mean, let's not all pretend that's how the Western world has acted. We're currently seeing it in the Russia-Ukraine thing, because the fact that Putin went to invade Ukraine, then the economic world has said, you know what? I mean, the Western world has said, you know what? Let's lodge sanctions on Russia. So the moment anyone stands up to them, they say, you know what? Let's put a sanction on them, because you're not respecting human rights, you're not respecting policies that we have told you. I'll again take you back to one of the points you brought up. Currently, I actually work with government. I work with Transmission Company Limited, UETCL. Most of our projects, like an electrical power line, let's say Hoima and Kemba power line, Kenda, or Gulu up to, let's say, Kisoro, most of them are funded by World Bank. World Bank is funded by the Western world. So most of their things come with conditions. They'll say, okay, for you to construct this, you need to respect human rights. You need to also bring in certain human rights aspects that we all know. You need to respect them in your country.
Just say it, LGBT.
What's my point? Idi Amin came up with his own laws in form of decrees. He would say, in Uganda, you're not supposed to walk in Kampala street with slippers. You're supposed to do this. You're supposed to do this. So the fact that the Western world hates tyranny, like what Putin is doing in Russia, of course, sanctions had to be there. Now, my point leads to your point, because the fact that we're not equipped so much, we're not able to run these enterprises. So the fact that he's dictating, that leads to the Western world looking at us through a microscope and saying that, you know what, I think Amin is not doing well in this country. We would rather have had Obote, who was a bit of a diplomat. So let's lodge sanctions. So I think one point leads to the other.
Okay.
Still, sanctions worsened the situation. They were as a byproduct of the current situation of what our leader was doing.
I think Lawel is before we leave this,
clearly.
Of course, it's still up for discussion, but I'm very sure Lawel has something to say that could be maybe that has been said. But even when you look at things like, when you say like, oh, people have retail shops and they are thriving, that's still very misleading. We've seen the statistics are showing that Ugandan businesses, we are a very entrepreneurial country, but Ugandan businesses, a lot of them, more than 3/4 don't live to see their first birthday. That shows you that there's something that, is actually wrong. People are coming up with their businesses, trying to skill themselves, but you see their businesses collapsing. Like there's a will, but something is fundamentally wrong. That's still something you have to look at, that, has not addressed that. People do have businesses. Are those businesses sustainable? What are the government policies to actually promote those businesses?
Let me just because
that's something we could come back to.
You see, Alex, me and you could have businesses. You could be dealing in Omo or like a retail thing. I could be dealing in agriculture. I could be selling, let's say, livestock. But there are so many factors which can promote a business. It's not just government policies. In fact, actually, in government's defense, government has actually come in to promote businesses. Bonabagagawale. Pride Microfinance. There are a number of schemes in which they tell you, we're going to give you a short-term loan.
Uganda Development Bank.
We're going to give you a short-term loan.
Parish model.
We're going to give you a short-term loan. So please develop your business. You pay us back at the lowest rate possible. government has its weaknesses. Like any other, as human beings, we are not perfect. You cannot be 100% healthy. So a retail person who owns a shop in Chikubo or in Gulu town has been able to access a small term loan where you can be able to pay back this loan. But it's not just money which promotes a business. It's your will, it's your passion. Have you just thought about a business and seen your neighbor dealing in agriculture, and then you also want to outcompete them? So it's not just government policy, of course, is very important. It's one of the major factors, but other factors also play.
Okay, thank you. I want to bring in Lawel. Lawel, I see you're itching to say something.
Yeah, he
I'm
is.
okay. I am just unhappy with, there is a lot, is it mental imprisonment? Or there's this thing African dictators and non-performers use to hoodwink us, of saying that the West is bad, as a way of us focusing on the West and then not hold them accountable for their own inadequacies. Look at it this way. For example, when you give the example that the West has those conditions on their loans and their funding, and you want to use LGBTQ as, because we don't accept it in our society, as to ridicule the West funding. I can tell you, even if you were to monitor the deals that are negotiated between World Bank and our policymakers, that condition is not there. They cannot make that demand because we cannot accept it. Right? What they say is that respect human rights. And when they say human rights, whose rights do they want? For example, if they say you must, for example, if this is global funding, they say, or any other funding, they'll say 40% should be directly dealing with women. So the conditions they put are consonant with their major policies. Right? So if we're giving you money on education, they have things that are broken down on how they want to implement their education. Right? So the problem we have is that we do not want to give those. We don't want to, our human rights record are bad, and we don't want to give those rights. We don't want to integrate some of those conditions, but it's not necessarily that they are ridiculous, right? If you are to compare the loans and the funding we get from the West vis-a-vis the loans we get from China, it is worse. But none of us wants to make that contrast, because what they ask of us is to adjust and have a better human rights record, have more women inclusivity, have more accountability measures, right? What China wants is that it's not going to give you any conditions, but it's going to take your assets. It's going to worsen your debt, right? So, because they find it easier to extend their debt burden to citizens than to give them human rights, they choose Chinese. And when they come to us, they tell us the West is bad. So, because I'm not saying they don't have their own interest. I'm saying the dichotomy they give us to deal with is bad. And when you hear Kidega and him talking about Western loans, you wonder. I want to give you an example. The IMF policies. The time when Tito Okello left, when he had refused partly to accept the IMF, what they call terms and conditions, but also because we're in a very bad economic situation, we're in turmoil, the economy was more or less getting to a point of no return. Right? So you have Museveni, who was saying he wanted this barter trade with Hungary and these other countries, and just because he knew the solution only lied with IMF and that structural adjustment policy. But anyone who is against IMF structure, IMF, those policies of liberalism and privatization, would be only right if you had a functional country with transparency, accountability, and you're saying, look, if we were managing our own institutions and assets, etc., we would have developed them. But for what has been showed in Uganda is that we were actually lucky that government is not in charge of most of these big enterprises. I gave an example last time of Bamturachi, that if Uganda Airlines was under private ownership, you wouldn't have such kinds of recruitment where someone from government makes a phone call and says, give this woman the job of CEO of the national carrier, of the national airline. So I think what it saved us, what I've come to accept, because most patriotic Ugandans want to say, come on, we should have remained with our cooperatives, we should have remained with our assets. But the truth is, we would have been mismanaged. And I think when Nkrumah said that, let's first get the politics sorted, he should have added that let's first have transparent, political, stable systems. If he meant just having power, then we were mistaken. Because currently if we were to, now, let's just look at how government is managing what it has. I think it is not managing it
Lawel,
optimally.
can I just pose a
Firstly,
question to you?
I am very
Because,
convinced.
yeah,
Firstly, I'm very convinced that if Uganda Airlines was under private control, and which perhaps gives profit to government, but it is managed by private entity, it would be run more efficiently. But maybe before you come in, what I wanted to comment on was the Amin issue. I think for me, some people call them historical accidents. I think for me it was a blessing in disguise. Because look, there is such a thing also as saying you have economic growth, but it is in the hands of only a few individuals, like is with South Africa. For me, I want to look at as a blessing in disguise that you had resources get back in the hands of the Ugandans themselves. And so for me, it was about those who took on from Amin to, rebuild the economy, but leave it in the hands of Ugandans. So Museveni, in his pursuit to be politically correct, decided to give back these Asian assets to the Indians. And still, you have Indians currently managing much of the economy. They don't take political positions, but they influence who sits in those positions. So with time, you're going to reach a time when they control us. So for me, for Amin to do that, perhaps it was not the most sane economic decision anyone would have made, but in the interest of the people, I think it was a good thing that you have resources, even when they are limited, but in the hands of Ugandans, as opposed to South Africa, where whites have most of their land and property, yet they are less than a quarter of the total population.
Fair enough, good argument. Because you try to make the argument for example, the Chinese. But I'll tell you, for example, that the China Road Belt policy, that is literally constructing roads across Africa at almost no interest rate. Have you asked yourself the question that, whereas it is a genuine good donation, yeah? Have you asked yourself the question that the local construction company that is being put out of business because of the goodwill of China to construct roads, or, for example, the donations we get from the West? Think about it in this way: the well-intended mosquito nets, malaria and etc. They are well-intended. But think about the domestic entrepreneur who is being put out of business because we are getting donations from China and the Western world. I think that's the argument that we're trying to examine, that the neo-colonialism is coming in from different points and different angles, and we must be very critical to examine them. Okay? And even these loans and all these grants, they are not because you spoke like you sit in the rooms that negotiate these deals, that you're sure of what terms and conditions we get and don't get, which I think is a very unfair argument. There are, of course, terms that will not be put formally, but they are, undertones. So I think that for us to imagine that these loans and interests come with no unfair conditions at all is also maybe being fallacious.
But Kidega, this is the thing. When IMF was going to give its money, it said you must privatize these institutions. You must, for example, education, that it has a big burden on your economy. Please let it be privatized and reduced. For example, the education sector.
Yeah, those are things that make logical sense. There are those that they are sure that will not be welcome, that they will not say formally or officially.
I don't know how you see them for you, but let me just say this. The biggest problem I have with his arguments is he seems to settle for less. Because when we make these arguments, we cannot just say, before colonialism, we didn't have this, now we can have a shop. We must have this discussion in light of the general economic growth across Africa and across the country. That you have countries which are transforming, right? Which you look at the figures of Kenya, and then for you're telling me to celebrate that I can have a retail shop. I don't think that is a sufficient.
But do you want to look at those figures from both ends of the coin? You equally look at their debt burden, which is almost tripling our own. So when you look at Kenya's GDP,
Kidega,
look at it vis-a-vis also the other.
Kidega, I think, let me just complete my argument. I think what we have currently in status quo is that you have a lot of people in poverty. And the percentage of the poor and the employed continues to happen. When you tell us that now I can open a shop without consideration of the economic climate in terms of taxes, in terms of subsidies, because for example, you tell me that China is constructing literally every road, which means that most Ugandans cannot construct roads. Government has not necessarily built their capacity to do what Chinese company, the quality of roads Chinese companies can do. It looks very interesting when you say that now I can open a shop which I couldn't open before independence. But when we look at 60 years of independence, and all you telling me is that I can open a retail shop, it is really bad. Right?
Okay, fair enough.
The point
Let's
around-
give Councillor Terry to just respond to some of those concerns.
So, Lawel, for me, I have like three rebuttals. I'll start with the donor funding. Why is it that when President Museveni refused to sign the anti-homosexuality bill, why was most of our funding cut off by the Western world? I'll give you that first question. Because as it is currently, even in newspapers, we can see it even with our own eyes. He takes pictures with Chinese investors or with the Chinese government or with Russia. The communist world is what is still giving us funding.
You know what sustains Ministry of Health?
Sorry?
You know what sustains our Ministry of Health?
Wait, I'll give you that. We still get funding
USAID
from...
and UKAID.
Yeah,
but
actually,
it's okay.
I was getting to that. Yes, we still get funding from the Western world. UKAID and USAID being one of our biggest donors. But the fact that we, in most of these deals and contracts that come where we need funding from IMF or World Bank, they are what are called implied terms. Even in contract law, we have express terms of implied. Still, even if on paper, they're going to say, okay, we're giving you this funding, we want education for a child in Gulu, child in Kapchora, they are still going to speak to the biggest policyholders and tell them that, by the way, we want LGBT also in your country. You're marginalizing people. Personally, I have had testimonies of my neighbors who have gone to Canada, US, and trust me, once you go there and start stating that I'm being marginalized, I need asylum because I'm a gay man, I'm a lesbian woman, you're going to get citizenship immediately in those countries. What am I trying to mean? The fact that we still hold our cultural values so much in Uganda, we are being curtailed so much in terms of funding. I'll bring it to my next point. The fact, okay, why has capitalism thrived so much in the world? Why even when America was colonized by England, why have they overtaken their former colonial master? Because most of America is privatized. The fact that in Uganda we can now own your own retail shop, the fact that Mukwano can have his, okay, Mukwano is an Asian, the fact that Charles Mbire can have his own establishments, or Patrick Bitature, well, given aside from his canoes and everything, the fact that he can own Hotel Protea on Naguru Skies. Fine, we do not know the internal dealings of his enterprises.
So we owe that to what?
Hold on.
Independence?
Hold on, I'm making a point. The fact that before independence, the ordinary Ugandan or African, even in apartheid government, could not even own a shop. You did not have a say in your own economy. So in Uganda,
that is true.
So in Uganda,
because I will support that by
we have our own weaknesses
about the 1938 trade ordinance. That
You
you
could
could
not
not
trade.
own any
That is
business
what we should be celebrating.
within the central
Lawel.
business area.
Lawel, you could go
What we should be celebrating. At 1962, people were already starting to own.
Hold on.
Mukwano,
Lawel,
these people
hold
are
on,
owning these
hold on.
businesses at 62.
Hold on, Lawel. Mukwano actually came in the early 1900s, and he has owned his enterprise for a while. The fact that you can own your own shop, we are a step further into that. Everything takes time. We are a country that has been scourged with wars. Yeah, I mean, decade in, decade out. So the fact that I'm happy enough that my uncle owns a shop, or the fact that he can, promote his business.
Let me just broaden Terry's argument.
Okay.
Because you see, the argument is that owning a shop is not divorced of certain core factors. For example, when he says that you can now own a shop and run it, it means that there is stability. You are not sure that, you are sure that tomorrow you'll come and still find your shop in place. Back 10, 30 years ago, you wouldn't be sure if tomorrow you'll come to work and find your shop still existing. Because maybe a war has erupted, or maybe one government is fighting another government.
soldiers have run
yes,
countries.
exactly. But today, there is confidence that I will open my shop, I'll run it, and there's political stability. Which stability plays a role in building an economic infrastructure. So I think that we shouldn't look at it prima facie, like on the surface of things that, oh, you know what, I can own a shop. There are other factors,
There are many
that are
factors,
underlying to that statement.
Yes.
That there is now political stability that your business can thrive. You can open it and it lasts, and you aren't afraid of maybe some
Moses.
bomb dropping on it.
Moses, if I may ask you
Wait,
something,
I
on
thought
that-
you finalize. Just one more point.
No, this is just a very good point, just for reflection.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we are to look at the global safety index
Yeah.
of the world, countries like the US, South Africa, they rank higher, like on the most insecure countries, but they are more developed economically. So if security is what we are basing on to say we are going to be prosperous,
Okay.
wouldn't
No,
you be-
no.
Okay,
Not to
Alex.
you. No, no.
Wouldn't you be
Okay.
developed?
Conversation has been narrowed so much.
Alex, get a testimony from Ukraine right now.
Okay.
If they
Alex.
are
That's
thriving
just a rhetorical
economically.
question.
Okay,
No,
Alex.
no, no.
Ever since,
No.
I have a
Okay,
question.
Alex.
No.
I have a
ever
question.
since
Get a testimony
Let's-
from
for him to
Ukraine right
respond.
now, and
So
then
both
you
of you
know.
to respond at
Yes.
once.
Yeah.
At the time of independence, it is said, and I think it is true statistically, that we were at the same level of development with Singapore, South Korea.
That's true.
I think even Kenya slightly, or they were even ahead of them. And currently, we rank miserably below all of them. The conversation I want us to engage in is, after independence, how much have we really liberated ourselves? Because liberation
Sure.
is beyond political independence to economic liberation. That by then we were under colonial masters. How much have we capacitated ourselves to outcompete or trade with them at equal footing, as opposed to labor exploitation? Because it is the same as was then. Maybe the executors are different. Maybe you consent yourself. But the thing is, after independence, 60 years, we still have labor externalization, and it is growing. So for me, the conversation I'm interested in is from independence.
Okay, can I ask a question? Of all those countries, how many of them haven't had a peaceful transition of power?
Let me tell you.
So our context is different. We are facing different political
So you
challenges.
actually
Let's have that conversation. Let's have that conversation.
So we go back to the politics.
No. So let's have the conversation, because it makes me seem like it's Uhuru, and
No.
we can now set up retail.
The politics plays a role on how the economy moves.
Yeah.
None of those countries,
big role.
none of those countries has never had a peaceful transition of power.
So this is the discussion we
So
should have.
we cannot expect that a country that has been
Kidega.
having political
Kidega,
turmoil.
this is the conversation we should have. That actually our own independence has been as disastrous as close to colonialism, because our own leaders, Idi Amin, Obote, Tito Okello, the early days of Museveni, etc., affected us, our own growth. We lost lives, we lost the economy,
Yes.
and that's a discussion we should have.
That is what I'm saying. That you cannot discuss this when you're divorced from the political, climate and all that.
Yes, so we should be, and Alexandra
Okay, I have
knows.
to give Terry a chance to respond,
Okay.
and I conclude with Monica. Yes, Terry. Some concerns were brought to you.
Yeah, so I think I largely I'd address them with my rebuttal towards Lawel and
Alexa.
and Alexa. I think we should look at Uganda and all the factors around it as a whole and not in isolation. Just like how we look at the constitution.
The law,
Yeah.
yeah.
There are so many factors that we need to consider. It's not just a political and economic bit of it. But if we're looking
There's
at
the
the
social aspect
There's
as
a
well.
social aspect about
Patriarchy, where
it.
women were not,
So I think it's a 50-50 because if we incriminate the government and the previous governments before, then how are we looking at other countries which have also done it, and they've come from the same situation as we have also come? Because I like to give an example of America. It's a multilingual country. It has so many cultures in it. It has so many different people, but they have managed as a country. We are okay. I would not like to give a comparison between us and America, but we have many factors in common. If they were colonized just like us and they have realized and pushed their economy to where they are right now, we can also do it.
Yeah.
We just need to work on a lot of things within ourselves. I would like to take you back to your point of the whole project thing. We're going to give a Chinese company a bid to do our roads in Uganda. Actually, currently we have many of them going on. But we also have local civil engineering companies or construction companies. I think it's just a matter of empowering them to an international standard, and also for our leaders to stop being unfair. Because if you're creating a company and you want to make a bid, and you want to participate in a bidding process and they give you that bid, it's not fair because other people are also trying to compete with you on the same level. So I think it's just a matter of us working on our internal issues, and I think we're good to go as a country.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, Terry. Prudence, let's just end with you before we take a short commercial break. There seems to be consensus that our economic situation in Uganda is somehow interlinked with the bigger global market, with the bigger global economic issue. So my question is that for us to participate effectively on a global market, we must have products of value, products of that can compete favorably with other products on the global scale. Do you think that there is enough being done by our government to empower local producers to have value addition in their produce? Look at our coffee, for example. Look at our milk, for example. Do you think that the government has put in place a proper economic system to ensure that there's value addition, so that by the time we export our coffee to whatever market it is, it has value and it can return the monetary value that it deserves?
Well, thank you very much. But I think for the case of Uganda, what the government can do, actually what the government is doing is not enough to put Uganda at that level where some countries are. Like, for example, before we even start exporting our things, what do we have like as a country? What are we now producing within the country that is not being exported? Is it to the best? Like, is it quality? Is it of quality enough? So I think it is not of quality enough, and the government is also not doing enough for our products to go outside the country there. Like, when we see investors, those ones who are investing in Uganda today, most of them are not Ugandans. And so they have those skills already. How about our Ugandans, like the typical Ugandans who are producing those things? I think what we need right now is to empower more, and maybe to maybe get a better way of packaging, and then also doing more so that the country exports better products, and then Uganda can maybe get somewhere, compete, be on that world global market like others are doing.
Yeah, thank you. I really wonder what Operation Wealth Creation, NADS are doing, because what we see is that they offer maybe quality seedlings, they are trying to mechanize agriculture, but maybe we aren't yet yielding so much from their efforts. But hopefully with time, we can begin to realize those efforts. Well, that is phase one of this conversation. We hope that you are enjoying. I know you have an opinion and a comment. There's a comment section right below this YouTube channel. Give us your comments. If you agree with any of the panelists, let us know. And if you disagree, it is okay. We are in a liberal world where opinions are accepted. So give your alternative opinion on the comment section. But above all, just don't blink, because we'll see you shortly after this commercial break.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We'll be back from that short commercial break. We hope that you are tuned and your seatbelt is tight, because we are going to shift gears. Like I had mentioned to you, or maybe if I had not, then let me mention it now, that we are going to also spare some time to talk about the most recently passed or proposed bill that Parliament has passed that is waiting the President's assent, the Computer Misuse Amendment Bill 2022. Shall explore, the new provisions that have been added, but also what is the intention of the lawmaker in bringing this particular law. Well, that is just for slightly later on. For now, let us just wrap up the whole economic question of Uganda post-independence as we move towards celebrating 60 years. Do we have gains? Do we have things that we can say, wow, we have progressed in this field economically? So in no particular order, I'll just give all of you 2 minutes to just wrap up your views regarding the economic situation in our country post-independence. And Terry, do us the honors. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Moses. I think all of us have given valid opinions and views. Normally, I'm someone who likes to respect everyone's views, and they are all intellectually driven. I like to always see life as both beautiful and ugly at the same time. We have both negatives and positives in life. In regards to our political economic situation, I think in the past things were so bad, we were so marginalized as a group, as a race, by our oppressors. Things have gone for the better, but even in that better, I think there are always emerging negatives that come up. Right now we are in a very good time to explore our business prowess as a nation, as a race, and we see this with a number of our companies which have been competing on a continental level, now competing on a global level with our former colonial masters. Much as there are positives, negatives are also there, and I think we always need to address them. I always believe in repair and rebuilding ourselves as a nation. We have gone through a lot of time of tribulation and political changes, but I think much as we are able to own a shop, I think we can always take it a step further. We can empower our privatization sector or our private sector with good government policies which can be able to promote the local Ugandan businessman. I think we can be able to marry the two. The private and government sector have to work hand in hand to promote a better and more prosperous Uganda.
Amazing. Yes, Alexa.
With regard to the economy, I think we need to recognize the role that government institutions play. I would not side more on the point of privatization of a lot of sectors, because I don't think that would work for us. I think it would be a bit more detrimental when capital is concentrated in the hands of certain individuals, and especially with the poverty level of Uganda at the rate at which it is, I don't think that would be more appropriate. And I would think we need to apportion more responsibility to the government as a policy maker and as a resource allocator. But I would also want to bring a very major point about the fact that, women haven't really, the role of women in economic growth. Whereas there's efforts on paper, I don't think it's translating, in practice. We do have effort, a lot of effort by policy, but it's not translating in practice. We see as of 2018 globally, the women, half of the world's population is women, but they contribute just as of 2018, just 37% of the world's GDP. And we see that a lot then is lost in terms of taxes, in terms of, economic growth, because you're having a very big percentage of the population excluded and not, working towards development. So I think, in the case of Uganda, women are mainly based in informal sectors. The ones who are working, they are mostly in the informal sector. So government should put a deliberate effort in, strengthening policy and supporting people in those informal sectors, the ones who do small businesses, come up with their small enterprises, the ones who are domestic workers, sex workers, to ensure that these people are taken into consideration with whatever policies are put in place and whatever incentives. Thank you, Moses, and
Yes.
the rest of the panelists.
Okay, Ndugu Lawel.
Thank you so much. For me, I think that, like all places, I think it was a good thing for us to be in charge of our own country, to attain independence, to be in charge of these institutions having been put in place by colonialists. Actually, I think colonial occupation perhaps had a lot of negativities in terms of slave trade, but I think it also had it was a blessing in disguise in terms of introducing us to trade and modern use of modern tools and technology to engage in economics. I think for me the question is always, after independence, then what? Because for me my disappointment is actually with post-independence, because I think that all African countries and all countries across the world were at some point under occupation. It may not be a foreign occupant, maybe even your own government oppressing you, as was with the French Revolution. But when you get in charge, what do you do with your own country? I think that we did bad, especially the time from 1967-9 up to 1986 there. And I think it has cost us a lot, because we have not been able to enjoy the fruits of independence economically. That people perhaps don't have war but have hunger. That people perhaps don't have war but their children are malnourished.
Sure.
For me, the situation in Karamoja is equal to even a war situation, because if you are going to sleep hungry and die of hunger, it's even worse than a situation of war, because there's no worse suffering. So I think for me, just put it to a conclusion, I think that it is not enough for us to say we took charge of ourselves. We need to really develop our individual countries, and that the independence should be felt in our household incomes and our families. Thank
Household income,
you. Yeah.
not at the national level.
That in my family, I should feel that,
Yeah.
I got independent, I earn money, and I enjoy myself in this country.
Amazing. Prudence, you have the last word on this topic.
I think I'll pick up from where Alexia stopped about women inclusion. Women need to be included everywhere, because apparently we see that 60% of the agricultural products are produced by women. So I believe that when we include women in all businesses, like let's say production, not only agricultural stuff, we shall flourish economically as a country. Thanks.
All right, thank you. That by all means puts a full stop on that first conversation. Let's now shift gears. Comrade Terry,
Why commentary?
for obvious reasons, at least in the first conversation I regarded Lawel. Why Terry is because he is the most senior member of the legal profession
I
here.
respect that.
Yeah, so I will give him that honor and respect to give us the background on which this amendment particularly was brought up, but also what unique provisions has this amendment included, but also the law in general around the computer misuse and laws that attempt to curtail or to regulate the internet and generally. So just a background on this particular law.
Okay, thank you so much,
Is
Moses.
there insufficiency in, to regulate this particular field, or?
Okay, before I even go to the legal field, I'll go to what is social media. I think since time immemorial, as human beings, we are all social creatures. We thrive, even our brains are wired towards being social. Now, fast forward, the world has evolved billions of years. We're now into the era of social media, information technology, and explosion. We have the whole world at the palm of our hands. But how do we regulate what is said on social media? I now go to the legal perspective of it. In Uganda, we have the Computer Misuse Act that was first brought up in 2011. It came up with a lot of provisions which were a little vague. They were touching on the point, but not so much. They were just left hanging, but they were just they were left there to promote other provisions that were going to come up to curtail certain things. In Uganda, we have a lot of things going on. We have the opposition, we have the government, we have people who have become despots, we have people who have deserted, I mean, there's a whole cocktail that we have in Uganda. Like I said in my earlier discussion, we live in a multilingual state, but that also comes with us promoting different backgrounds and us as innate characters. The Computer Misuse Act. In 2011, it was not so strong in terms of curtailing sort of hate speech, sort of. And I would say social media is it's still a brand new thing in Uganda. Not everyone has a smartphone. A good number of them have a smartphone, but not everyone has a smartphone. So anyone can be able to type anything in Uganda. Anyone can be able to type anything in Lango or English. Now, the amendment comes in because I'm guessing it's Mr. Nseroko, right?
Honorable Nseroko.
Yeah, Honorable Nseroko who brought it up. He brings it up to start saying that a child should be regulated in terms of using his or her smartphone. Parents should be able to monitor this child. Secondly, hate speech and promotion of something which is false, promoting false propaganda, is now an offense. They bring the terms of different clauses. Clause 2 in specific goes into amend section 12, which brings about making it higher,
Hacking and sharing information.
perfect. I'll bring it up.
Interception.
Yes, interception. So I would think that's a positive because our data needs to be kept private, and the US has been trying to curb that for many years. Many times they have hacked into the Pentagon, which is the center of intelligence in the US. So then bring it up here, I think that's a positive, because if Moses, you're a software engineer by profession,
Yes.
and a brilliant lawyer in the making. If you can be able to hack into Terry's phone, then I think clause 2, which is amending section 12, comes in to protect Terry's privacy to data. What I don't agree with, in all honesty, is trying to curb social media. I think freedom of speech is going to come with all sorts of opinions. If someone does not agree with what Honorable Nseroko says, then I think he should be able to have that right enjoyed. Because freedom of speech is a non-derogable right, meaning it's given to you at birth.
Inherent.
Yeah, it's inherent. So I think it may be a backdoor to try and curb. Fine, Terry should be able to say, I don't agree with Honorable Nseroko. But it should be able to regulate me or limit me on how much I can say I've not agreed with a certain law that has been put, a certain policy. So I think an amendment is always good, but we should also go back to what a bill is. A bill is just an enactment which is ready to be passed. An enactment by Parliament that's ready to be passed and signed. So once a bill is just a bill until it's passed and signed by the head of state. But I think before they pass this Computer Misuse Amendment Act, amendment bill rather, I think we should first discuss it more. I think there are more pressing issues in the country than trying to curtail what Lawel is saying on social media or what Terry is saying on social media. I think we have more pressing issues. Fine, I don't agree with insulting anyone. I don't agree with.
Terry, are you trying to tell us that that act on the speech is trying to deny us our freedom of speech?
Yes, because I mean, then that means the bill would have to go into further explain what is hate speech. Because to me, I may put something on my Twitter handle, or say something on my YouTube channel, but to me it's not hate speech, unless I think being a scholar of the law, we should all enjoy our rights, but there's a limit also how much we should enjoy our rights. We should not do it in infringement of someone else's person or someone else's feelings. I think you should, yes, give your expression, but don't go into abuse someone else or a politician, because there is a point they have tried to bring out by bringing this bill or saying something or being pro-government or against government. So I think to amend an act just to try and curtail how much someone should say in the guise of hate speech, I don't think that's right.
I know that Article 44 of the Constitution only mentions about 4 non-derogable rights. I think the right to habeas corpus, the fair hearing,
Torture.
torture, and then I think substitute, something like that. So meaning that your right to express yourself, your right to association, can actually be regulated or limited by the state.
Yeah.
So do you think that this is the state trying to limit some of these rights that Terry is saying that no, they should be actually non-derogable? That your right to express yourself, your right to freedom of speech should actually be a non-derogable right. But whereas our legal framework does not provide for that, do you think that that could be a lacuna in the law, that your right to express yourself should be inherent and therefore it should have been entrenched under Article 44?
All right. So in regards to that
But
section,
also your general opinion about this particular law.
okay, so section 12, to answer the first question about the non-derogability of section 12 and freedom of speech under Article 29, I do recognize that, this is a very important freedom. Freedom of speech is very important. And of course, there are limitations to our rights with particular regard to freedom of expression. It should be limited in a way that that limitation is demonstrably justifiable. Yeah, it's in public interest, or to curtail a spread of information maybe that may be dangerous to public health or public morality. So when you look at the whole point of demonstrably justifiable, we have to then take into account that freedom of speech is important, it's key, but you cannot place it on the same level as freedom from torture, habeas corpus, a
So
right to
it can
fair
be
hearing.
regulated. It should be regulated.
Yeah, it should be regulated, but those limits, we have to look at the fact of, is it demonstrably justifiable? Is it justified to limit, without even is it justifiable to just say, there's nothing like hate speech? What is hate speech? Does the act, or who exactly is going to tell us what hate speech is? Or is it going to be subject to changing attitudes of, either the judiciary or the person who has been hate speeched, for lack of a better word? Like,
And that's
who
the
is
point I
going
was
to
driving at.
who's going to regulate that? But anyway, this bill also in particular, it's a bit redundant, If we already have the regulation to Interception of Communications Act, why are we then enacting other clauses to stop interception of? It's like there's better things we can regulate within this bill.
Sorry,
For example,
Yes, just a brief supplement what you said.
Yeah.
I would agree with her that it's a bit redundant to bring up such a bill because we already have the Data Protection and Privacy Act, which was just done in 2019, just
less than 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Less than 3 years ago.
less than 3 years ago. So to bring up something which is already there, it's a bit redundant. I think it's a waste of our time. We have a multitude of
Enormous laws.
issues.
Yeah.
actually, speaking of that, if they wanted to enact an amendment, to curb use of social media or misuse of, computers, why don't we look at a section that is going to focus on cyber harassment, especially with regards to how social media or the internet era is promoting harassment or violence against women and girls? We see a lot of people
That's his
who are
argument. Anyway.
we see a lot of revenge porn out there. We see a lot of bullying. Why doesn't why doesn't this bill bring into account things like that? Because we have so many young Ugandans, and they are very susceptible to the effects of social media through things like that. And then there's another section with regard to, is it section 23, with regard to, in regards to the amendment, children, that proposes sharing information about children that's not authorized by guardians and parents. Whereas it could be good, it's viable to put limitations on that, because we've seen so many cases of there's been those recent videos about child marriages, the lady who was torturing a child. That's information that is shared by concerned people about those children. If we are intercepting them from and criminalizing that, how are we going to get to know about the ills in society? Then lastly, on the issue of sharing of malicious information, like that's still meant to just, oppress political dissidents, because what is malicious information? Still, that's operating in a vacuum. We are going to have politicians and government officials just use that to curtail people, like we saw what happened to Stella Nyanzi or Kakwenza, and this will lead to arbitrary torture and arbitrary imprisonment of people.
Good arguments, good arguments. Lawel, let me come to you. I know of Professor Evi Daisy, the professor on rule of law, and he says that we all must be equal before the law, and when there is no equality, then people are a subject of the whims and mercies of those who are superior to them. And this particular law, I think, raises some questions of ambiguity, issues around hate speech, issues around malicious, conduct. So do you think that the failure to define clearly the parameters of hate speech and malicious, acts, do you think it is creating a more vacuum, just to use Alexa's words, a more vacuum or a lacuna in the law, and therefore it will shift it to the hands of those who wield the power to interpret?
Okay, thank you. Of course, that's obvious that people who interpret the law is the state infrastructure, the judiciary, where there are gray areas. But I think for me, what I wanted to start with is I wanted to look at the mover of the motion to understand the faith. From what background does he propose these amendments?
Sure.
You are uptown, but first who are downtown and on social media platforms like Facebook. So this is an MP who was so much frustrated with the attacks from NUP and how these people are using heavy words, shaming everyone. That kind of ridicule. Zari went through that. A lot of individuals who came out to show that they were discontent with a person of Bobby Wine's agenda had a lot of backlash from social media. We call them social media warriors these days. And so for him, I think he was, like a wounded lion, and I'll do everything possible to shut you up. And when you look at his live broadcast on Facebook, etc., he was, angry. And for me, I want to look at him and his amendment, his faith from that background of an individual who is just uncomfortable with how NUP people were conducting themselves on social media. But for me, what I think is that blurred him from the bigger picture, especially him being a lawyer. So what he did was try to appeal to the elite who were against that kind of conduct by NUP, but also disguised it and broadened it, include all of us who, for example, are not fine with sharing girls' nude pictures. So that's why you have clause 2, which says that, which criminalizes hacking into someone's device and then sharing that information. You get, so to say that, we are protecting these girls, which I think on its own is a good thing, but I also don't think it is exclusive to this bill. I think like he has said in the data protection and privacy, there are rules and regulations against hacking. The second one was that you cannot share a child's picture or information without the consent of their people who are in charge of them. And then the other one was, like that she said, hate speech, tribalism, ethnicity, which are largely things we don't agree with. So for me, I think even in the desire to regulate social media, to curb social media noise, he also wanted to take that populist, elitist approach of including our sentiments against sharing, for example, nude pictures of girls, hate speech, etc.
How about those who share them voluntarily? Because you're speaking about hacking and sharing someone's pictures. How about those who share them voluntarily?
I think it's something to do with the Ministry of Ethics and Integrity. I'm sure they have an instrument also against
anti-pornography.
Anti-pornography and all those things. So for me, I want to understand the mover of the bill from that perspective. Okay. And of course, when he moves it to a house which has a majority that has had semblances of wanting to curb social media and that kind of discourse. So it's Nyankole, you call it when you push someone who's already squatting, so they just fall. So when he brought it to, I think, to government, they of course took it up and it passed. And you see how it was very fast. Other important bills like local content bill that was being moved by Oshabe was in the past parliament, and they just debate. It has been debated up until this week. Most of the bills really take long. Apart from these new ones on regulating capital markets, digital financial transactions, which also passed the other week. But you realize that this particular one, I think government had a lot of interest. So for me, I want to assess it not just on its merits, but on the faith in which it is brought. We all do not want hacking into someone's phone and sharing their nude pictures, but we think there are also laws which already existent against that. We have a lot of robust legal law around against tribalism, discrimination according to tribe and religion. We have all those things.
Article
So
21.
for me, this was just to gag or to limit social media. So Kidega, as much as you believe that it is derogable, it can be limited, I think as people who believe in democracy, even when we are putting in place those laws, we must be so careful that we must find it so hard to limit freedom of speech. If anyone believes in democracy, we shouldn't have laws to limit speech because it is legally viable. It is possible to limit it legally. We should find it very difficult. So what I'm saying is that let the boundaries of what someone can say be so big that someone can freely express themselves. But I think the political me says, let these laws pass. Perhaps when we change leadership and we have a sober generation, we can reverse some of these bills and acts. But for me, my understanding of all this is you're limiting what people say on social media. And look at the track record of the act that has been existent, which people have been charged. It is the political, the people who make noise on social media against government. And for me, it's the faith and but like I said, the generational political me says, let these laws pass, and when we are sober up and as a nation, we shall reverse and revise them.
Okay, fair enough. Prudence, let me come to you.
Yes.
Mine is just a question around the sustainability. For a law to be a law, it must be efficacious. Efficacious?
Efficient. Efficient.
No.
Efficacious.
Yes, efficacious. Something like that.
That people can obey.
Yes, that
Okay.
it must be able to be obeyed. It must be enforceable. There was a Honorable Zake case whereby they were trying to trace where a tweet came from, and Uganda's ICT framework, UCC, failed to actually trace where this tweet was coming from. They failed to trace that this tweet was coming from Honorable Zake's phone. No, here we are saying that we want to intercept communication. We want to maybe, limit hacking. Do you think that as a country, we are ready? We have the infrastructure to actually enforce this law, given that it requires so much technology and I would say sophisticated. So do you think we are ready as a country to enforce this law?
First of all, I'd like to appreciate all these discussions by Alex, Terry, and Lawel. Oh my God, I think I'm the only teacher who is here and all of you are lawyers, but that's fine. Moses, some of these laws have been there. So I don't think that there is something very new that's going to come up, especially with the technology of tracking and the rest. Even if they try, but some of these things have been existing. As Terry said, there is a bill already. But why do they still have to bring another one? Do you think it will be more effective than the other one, which was already there and it has not been of use very much? Because I've been asking around, didn't we have a bill about computer misuse? And then the question was, the answer was it was already there. So if it is already there, what's new what's very new that these people think that they'll change, apart from maybe those things of saying the hate speech and the rest? So I think this thing is just, okay, it's just there, but it's going to be quite hard because people are not sleeping, by the way. They also find new ways of doing their things. So yeah, because we also have people are also being taught. We have ethical hacking? I don't know much about it, but yes, they are being taught of also how to handle those things. So it's not something new, and yeah.
Okay, maybe something small. There was a case, I think, of government wanted to identify who TVO was Tom Voltaire. He was he had a Facebook account where he would reveal, I think, government secrets and say a lot of things. And I think government moved to, I think, have Facebook reveal the identity, and Facebook declined. And I think there's a challenge there that I don't think we have capacity to have, for example, Twitter or Facebook, which have a lot of security. To reveal their true identity. For example, if Kidega said that I am not, the account is not mine, I don't think UCC or even government has capacity, especially given that these are Western driven, which and so they have this thing of wanting to protect people. I think also the thing we should interest in ourselves is that most of these social media have their own regulation of what you can post or not. Even content, for example, if you put someone who is wounded, then you can't view the image, or some even are banned. So I think we also have some sort of regulation, self-regulation by those handles. So, but I think your question is interesting. How is government, for example, if I say the account I operate is not mine, someone is using my names, I don't know, because there must be some sort of causation or something to prove that indeed it is mine and I'm the one who tweeted. So
good argument. Terry, let me just come to you. What I know is that the law, the constitution, must be a living document. And that is why the framers of any constitution provide for provisions of how to amend a constitution. For example, I think Article 168 entrenches some articles that are that for them to be amended, you must have a referendum. So, but the point is that a constitution must be a living document. Any law, it should be able to to address the needs and the ever-changing environment. Uganda has had so many amendments, and this is just one of them. Do you think that the law in Uganda, the 1995 constitution, or the current law is still the consensus of Ugandans in 1995? Or the mere fact that we have had so many amendments in our laws is therefore implying that the current laws are no longer a consensus of 1995. So do you think that we need a general constitutional review? Because otherwise these amendments are becoming so many. So do you think we just need to sit back and say, okay, I think that the consensus that the people had in 1995 has, I think, ever since lost its way, and we need to come up with a new consensus? And therefore avoiding all these so many amendments. Because like you said, just a law was passed in 2019. Now a different law is being passed less than 3 years later. So maybe the constitution isn't addressing some of these gray areas.
Several acts are normally children of a constitution. A constitution is a mother law of the land. So all of these other acts we have, like Computer Misuse Act or the Penal Code Act, are as a result of the constitution.
That's right.
I think I'll give you an example of constitutions that have been there for hundreds of years, almost thousands. The UK Constitution, the US Constitution. Why is it that they are still they were framed in such a way that they still address us currently, people 100 years ago, and people 100 years from now? Because they looked at the general public. I don't think human nature generally changes. We just adapt to our environments, but the laws of human nature still stick, at least to a greater percentage. We don't change from how we were primarily. It's just technology that changes us. So going back to the 1995 Constitution, most of how Uganda has been governed since 1995 up to now is, I don't think much has changed in how we are being governed. I mean, in terms of our laws, because when you look at provisions that talk about how land is governed under the constitution, I don't think we are facing. I think that's how the trend has been, is, and how it's going to be. I think we have lived in harmony from how the constitution has been framed. I think, to answer your question, we may need to have a general outlook, because still, of course, it cannot address how things are moving so fast. We live in a fast-paced world. So if we have just one general referendum or just one general outlook at how the constitution can be changed a little bit, because I still think that many of the articles are still good. The clauses, I think they're still good in how our country should be governed.
Because why I ask is, should it be the case that each time we face an issue, we have to have a law for it. Or some issues could actually be addressed,
Yeah.
extra constitutionally, not exactly through.
I think we should look at the relevance of us changing it, because if there's a trying time, then a law should come up. If something has changed, then the law should come up. I think it's just, honestly speaking, it may be a desperate attempt. Because human beings have always been afraid of the unknown.
Yeah.
So when something new that the younger generation can adapt to and the older generation cannot adapt to, they now say, we can't understand this.
Yeah.
Let's come up with an amendment.
The law.
So I think we should first take time and look, is it really viable?
Because,
is it relevant? Then we can now look at an amendment.
Yeah, because some of these laws that we are rushed to come up with could actually be addressed through moral. Actually, they are addressing moral questions.
Yes.
That could have been addressed through cultural institutions, through maybe inter-religious council. I mean, there are
some
other
form of
approaches.
sensitization. Yeah. So but to make an amendment, a bill.
Otherwise, we'll have like 1,000 of laws.
Yeah. In other
you're right. It's like if we have a clear take on what freedom of speech is for us, it doesn't matter whether it is in person or on social media. There must be consistency. You don't need to make a law for social media. It is that particular speech is not accepted in our society.
And that is perhaps a moral question.
But also we should look at the relevance of the acts by the way. Because we can say that it's not of relevant, but there are some people also being affected very much, you get. But also, if it's about maybe as Terry is saying that it's trying to limit our freedom of speech, then why would we go for that act?
Yeah.
So I think
we need to look at the bigger picture.
Good question.
Yes.
Yeah, good question. Yes, Alexa, I have a question for you, but
maybe before we go to your question, I could even answer it so preemptively. But one thing we should look at is, the era of the internet regime is a bit different. Yeah. It's not the same as every other thing. The internet is something that's big, that's always changing, that's always growing. We are in the era of Web3. Even the people, I'm sure, who came up with the internet never envisioned that, it would go this far. Yeah. So there's so much that's changing. So it would make sense why legislators would want to make laws that, keep adapting to these changes, to these very many things that, are growing. But again, maybe the approach is now what I think should change. Let's not just look at the relevance of, these provisions now. When we look at the internet regime, I think the approach to legislation or to the laws that govern, or governance of internet governance, the approach is what should change. Instead of, saying, let's come up with a law every time and then things change, we could look at having people or experts, or we could look at having bodies that are going to adjust just certain policies, make certain policies that will be adjustable according to the condition, looking at this may change this way, let us change things this way, not just bringing, something like we want a bill or a law to regulate, cryptocurrency, and you bring it to a group of parliamentarians who have no idea what cryptocurrency is, who have no idea what Web3 is. You need to have experts on board who understand the ever-changing environments and, maybe put in place policies that will govern and are flexible. Such things will address the need to always run to parliament with they are coming up with laws that they haven't understood and they may not even regulate effectively. Thus bringing us to the question, is this relevant every time? Why don't we have certain policies or bodies that will handle those issues that come up in a way that is expansive and is forward thinking? I think that would be better, especially with regard to the internet regime. Then I would also look at the fact that, there's big things in the internet era that we should be looking at. We are going to have, a lot of international trade that's happening, a lot of globalization that's happening just within, within offline, which is happening online. So is our government ready to, manage that? If we have maybe data protection laws, how are we going to ensure that this works across, the globe? How is the Ugandan government going to ensure that, let me say, people who are sharing their data with those big companies like Facebook, like Apple, that it's in consonance with,
The
American
domestic
laws and globally.
Mm.
Yeah, how are we going to make sure we are in sync, or that our governments can even ensure that data of its citizens
Yeah.
is protected globally?
Yeah.
How are we going to ensure that if we are trading and purchasing something on Apple, and then they maybe deduct much more money from my credit card, what is in place to make sure that there is some sort of remedy when that happens? Or even like global trade on a bigger scale, because a lot is happening. Currencies are moving across globes that in ways they can't
Blockchain and
even
all
be
those
controlled.
things.
Yeah. So I would think that progressively those are the things, maybe if we are to think of such laws with regard to internet governance, those are the laws that we should be thinking of, rather than these things that are very minor level. Yeah.
Perhaps that is the bigger picture that Comrade Terry and Comrade Prudence mentioned earlier on, that what is the bigger picture. And just to conclude this conversation, Lawel, still regarding the bigger picture, what if we are looking at this from the wrong lenses rather? What if the basic structure doctrine of the law has actually been altered, and therefore some of these amendments and so many of these laws are only as a result of the alteration of the basic structure doctrine? And what do I mean by this? I mean that when we amended, for example, Article 102B, or when we amended Article 105 to remove term limits, we altered with the basic structure doctrine of this constitution. And that some of these amendments are only as a result of the already altered foundation.
Yeah.
Do you agree with this school of thought?
I agree with you. And I always tell my friends who choose to venture into NGOs in law that everything starts and ends with the politics. And that if the politics is not right, everything else is going to be affected. I think that when you are making a constitution, you want to be more perspective, to look at the bigger picture, also to project as a country is changing, and therefore the law is alive to those changes, as opposed to it being more reactionary, that there is a challenge, then you make a law to curb it. But I also think it's about, because the constitution itself as a document is nothing without constitutionalism as a spirit.
That's right.
And so, like you said, if for example, the amendment of the age limit, of term limit, etc. are altered, it means that, because those are foundational, they speak to what that constitution was about. They speak to leaders subjecting themselves to those very fundamental clauses of, if my time comes to a close, I should respect the constitution. So if a leader says, I can change it, it means that the whole faith, the lack of respect for clauses, the fact that I can choose it as to when I want and when it aids me. So it means that generally is that we don't find it very hard amending the constitution. Like we don't find it like something serious. We think it is okay. You can amend it. Even you, if I say that we're going to change from universal suffrage or to a parliamentary system of voting, you would say it's possible because it has been demonstrated. But in other countries, it would be a huge debate of why shouldn't we continue to vote?
So do you think that the framers of the constitution maybe?
I think that because our constitutionalism, the spirit has deteriorated, it has also had an effect on our legislation and amendments of constitutions. But maybe what I wanted to say, I agree with her that we need these laws. Why I don't agree with her is the solution. The idea that we need experts to, analyze these laws. Again, legislation takes part in parliament. The only solution is still a political one, where stakeholders are involved in parliament, as is Kenya. The best entrepreneurs are in parliament, professors of law, etc. are in parliament. If you are a serious entrepreneur, engaged in industrialization, in economics, the law, etc., and you're in parliament, you're touched, you have an understanding, you know what is at stake. So the solution for me, I think, is the right people getting in charge of the politics of parliament. And that is when you will have serious discussions. When the bill on insolvency, the digital cryptocurrency current that was passed of recent, parliament was almost empty. The side of opposition had like only 10 people. Like, it demonstrates lack of respect and of appreciation of that law, but also the sense of urgency. So if you are involved in capital markets, etc., and you know that the law on this is going to be passed, you are going to be in parliament, you're going to have a lot of input, and you're going to debate. So if you have largely people who are not who are not the biggest shareholders in the economics of the country or in the law, in the legal regime, then you will not have quality laws.
Wow.
It's that the best of of our country are not interested in the politics.
Good argument, good
So-
argument. Colleagues, our time is fast spent.
Okay, I would
don't know
like to
how-
maybe just bring this on table. Whereas that's the ideal you want, that we would want to have the best brains in parliament. They are not there. They are not interested. And because we also see it's reflective of our parliament, we see the people who go to parliament, what puts them in parliament. A lot of it is, popularity. It's a
Right.
popularity contest. If I've been arrested the most this year and I've made sure I've made noise about it, people will vote for me. So mine is more of addressing a short-term need. The fact that we will have this body that goes and consults. Of course, you have to take into consideration the will of the people, because that's what laws are supposed to represent. So we would have these people know how to expertly do this, consult the relevant stakeholders, consult the people, because things don't affect us, of course, all the same. Consult legislators, and then come up with a bill that is well informed. Whereas Lawel takes the long term of building from grassroots interest, civic interest in issues. Can this be done on the table? That's more like it on my part.
Wow, wow.
Yeah.
What a panel you guys have been. It has been very amazing. I would love this to go on and on, but unfortunately our time is fast spent.
Yeah.
But I know it's only courteous that I give you 30 seconds to say bye to the viewers and just give us your last words on the show. Lawel, I'll begin with you as I come towards Alexa. Just in 30 seconds, your last words.
Thank you so much. We always have a lot of conversations about what is wrong, largely, even whether it's economics, whether it is the legal. I hope that we shall have a time when we shall, be saying we are making it the same way we are saying we all admire Kenya's politics and handover of power. That we also have a time when we are admired, but I think it will take consensus of our generation to say this is the country we want. And Kidega knows every time we are engaging, I tell him, as the young people, we will not have the leverage of making excuses because we have seen all this. And when our time comes, we can't blame colonialists or that there was no freedom. We had to first ensure stability and peace. So for me, it's a clarion call of a generation to do the right that we are debating here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Prudence.
Well, thank you very much. It was an interesting discussion. I personally learned a lot from my colleagues, and thanks all to the viewers.
Yes, Terry.
Dear viewers, thank you so much for hosting me on Civic Space TV. This is my third time appearing on the show. Moses, thank you so much for the invite. You have actually fired up my day. It was such a cold morning, but to have a panelist of people who are so aware socially and intellectually of what's happening in their country, I think it's incredible. I'm honored to have shared the panel with ladies and gentlemen. My name is Terry Kahuma. I'm a lawyer, an advocate, soon to be enrolled in the bar. I host my YouTube channel, Simply Legal by Terry Kahuma, on YouTube. And I'm also the CEO of Fameron, which is a legal mobile app which connects lawyers and people together. And thank you so much for hosting me on the show. I've loved to have shared my views with all of you. I think our country is moving to at a fair pace. There's good and there's bad. I think I would like to agree with Lawel and Alex. We just have to take charge as a generation. I love inspiring us. I don't know whether I'm in the position to inspire, but I think it's not like I'm an elder or something. But I think as a generation we ought to take charge of what we have. I think we are the future of this country. So we are seeing all that's going on, both in our country and the region at large. And I think we ought to adapt the changes that we are seeing and to hope that our grandchildren are going to find a better nation. Thank you so much. And I give it
in the
on to
spirit
Alexa
of
now.
serving best for last time.
Yes.
I'm very, very much honored to actually share this space with everyone. Lawel, Prudence, Terry, Moses, and our crew. It's my absolute pleasure that there's civic awareness and it's youth who are largely taking charge. It gives a lot of hope for what's to come ahead, and discussions like this I hope they can reach out at large and increase our civic awareness as a country, given that that's one of the major issues we have for lack of political participation, as Lawel noted, of especially intellectuals. We are interested in very different things because of very many factors. So this is a very brilliant space. I hope a lot more of this can happen, and I hope to, be invited again. Thank you, Moses, for the work you've done. And I hope the viewers out there can, share with us their views in the comments. And yeah, please don't forget to be more civically aware, inform, and, disseminate such information, because it's at this grassroots that we spread the message. Yeah, thank you so much.
Wow, I can never thank you all enough. Comrade Lawel, Comrade Prudence, Comrade Terry, and Comrade Alexa.
I'm not a comrade, I'm not a communist.
Okay, thank you all for sparing the time to be on the Youth Roundtable. Of course, to the producers, Ndugu Rashid and your team, thank you for ensuring that our viewers get this show right on time. Well, I'm only a moderator, I only ask questions, but I think that if I were to give an opinion, just conclusively, is that as a young person, this future belongs to you. And let us abandon the rhetoric that we are leaders of tomorrow. No, we are not viongozi wa leo, we are viongozi wa leo. Sorry, wa kesho. No, we are not viongozi wa kesho, we are viongozi wa leo. Yeah. That is in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, of course. Yeah. But from us to you, we say have a lovely afternoon and see you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.